Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Shedd, a DeKalb resident and the host of Chakira's Corner. This is a show where we discuss pertinent agenda items from the Board of Commissioners meetings with Commissioner Chakira-Johnson, the current presiding officer of the Board of Commissioners. We will also share community updates from District 4 of DeKalb County. Commissioner Johnson is also a member of two county committees, the FAB Committee, which handles finance, audit, and budget, and the PWI Committee, the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. Commissioner Johnson has 5 focus areas for District 4 of DeKalb County: housing, infrastructure development, youth development, Memorial Drive revitalization, and community connections. Today, we are very excited to welcome DeKalb County's Director of Code Compliance and Enforcement, Tonza Clark, as our guest this episode. I'll be facilitating a conversation between Director Clark and Commissioner Johnson on issues relevant to DeKalb residents at District 4 specifically. But before we get into all that, I'm going to ask Director Clark to join me for a few quick questions on her and how she came to this position and her goals. So Director Clark, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you and great to meet you. So a question we like to start off with here is if you could tell us a little bit about your career and what drew you to working in the department that you oversee now.
Well, I've worked for several governmental agencies throughout my career. DeKalb County Board of Health, the Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists, and then a DeKalb County government employee for over 20 years. And so I've worked for the Board of Commissioners, several departments, the Board of Commissioners, Community Development, Plan and Sustainability, voter registration, and of course, code compliance.
That's a lot. So you've seen how things work in a lot of different areas.
Yes, I've been in the county since working for DeKalb County since 2004. So I've seen lots of changes, lots of growth, lots of transformation.
That's great. And tell us about when you took over this department.
In May of last year. So I just celebrated 1 year in the position. And so, but I've been in the department since 2010. So, this is, I've been, working first as the foreclosure and vacant property registry manager. Then I became the code administrator, and now I've been promoted to the director.
Well, great. Well, I'm glad to have you behind the helm since you've had so much experience in the county and specifically in that department. It sounds like a great fit. So with that, let's bring Commissioner Johnson onto the stage here and start the conversation between the two of y'all.
Good morning, Matt. Good morning, Director Clark.
Good morning, Commissioner Johnson. How are you?
Good morning. Yes. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How y'all doing today?
Good.
Doing well.
Good. Thank you for joining us, Director Clark. You and your team are doing great work for the county, so we appreciate you taking the time out.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yes, we are, and that's a big function of this podcast, is to let folks know that are tuning in that kind of what your department, what the respective departments of directors we talk to in this podcast, what the scope is of the work that they do. And so we can learn how to better interact with our departments and then also appreciate what they do more. So on that note, Director Clark, I think a lot of people think about code compliance as, kind of people filing complaints about grass, their neighbors, stuff they don't like, or maybe being too loud. Could you give us a better sense of the scope of the issues your department handles day to day?
Yes, so we do a lot more than just grass. We take literally a comprehensive approach to our inspection processes, and basically we enforce a lot of codes, and some of those applicable codes, it's property maintenance standards. So in addition to your high weeds and grass, it's the upkeep of the property, what is dilapidated, peel and paint, whether you have open storage of trash and debris or unregistered vehicles parking on the grass. We enforce all of the zoning codes and the land use codes, sign regulations, permitting and business license, solid waste, illegal dumping, noise regulations. So, and then most recently, the video surveillance ordinance and also the blight tax ordinance. So we have a wide range of enforcement codes that we address across the county.
It's a lot. It's a lot to keep eyes on. So Commissioner Johnson, kind of along those lines, what do you usually hear from your constituents in District 4 about that relates to what Director Clark just outlined for us?
So I think the emails and calls that we get kind of run the gambit of everything she's mentioned. We've gotten emails about party houses, nuisances at businesses. We've kind of gotten a little bit of everything in District 4, which I think is kind of the same for pretty much most of the county. And Director Clark and her team, they're always really responsive. And I know she's going to probably talk about this later, all the additional staff and the increase in hours that they've done in the department to really address these issues. So we still get some emails in because, you know, as the commissioner, if someone, usually they don't start with us, right? If they feel like they haven't gotten the response that they want, then they'll escalate to us. But I do feel like we're getting less escalations because their team is doing a good job of handling the calls that they're getting.
Well, that's great. So what are y'all doing differently under your leadership that you think is mitigating some of those complaints?
So part of that is we're really taking a proactive approach in how we enforce the codes across the county. Some of those things, including, increasing our business hours. So now we operate 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, from 8:30 a.m. until 7 p.m. And in addition to that, we are canvassing our commercial corridors. We are doing hotel-motel sweeps where we enforce all of the egregious hotels and motels across the county. Same thing with our multifamily properties, apartment complexes. So we are making sure that, we try to head off those issues before they become, just egregious. And some of them are egregious, but it's staying ahead of it. Loitering, that is a huge issue, and it drives crime across the county. And so part of that, what we do is we partner with the DeKalb County Police Department, and also our business owners, get them to sign on to allow the police department to enforce loitering on private property. And so that's been a huge initiative that's been very successful. We started it out with our hotels and our motels, with our convenience stores and gas stations across the county. And we've got just about almost 100% compliance rate of those hotels and motels. So now, all the businesses are hearing about the success of it and they're signing on. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. Same thing with the video surveillance. We go out to the business establishment, we check the equipment to make sure that the video cameras are working, so that if there are issues or a crime committed at these locations, the DeKalb County Police Department and the investigators will be positioned to be able to view that video footage in real time and also obtain the footage so that they can be able to solve these crimes a lot quicker. And the initiative has been very successful. So we are, proud of that. Also, public education. we can't do what we're doing without educating the public. We can assume that, maybe people are not following the codes, not keeping up with their properties because, they just want to do that. But I want to think that maybe they're doing it because they don't know what the code is. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that we educate our residents, and we take education very seriously. So we are rolling out PSAs, working with DCTV, special features in the CEO's weekly newsletter that goes out. Also, every citation and warning notice that we issue, we always leave educational material at the property so that the residents will be well versed and aware of what violations are. So it's something we're canvassing the community, and some members of the community have also stated that they've gotten letters because we've also been doing mass mailings to community, letting them know, hey, we're going to be out in your neighborhood. Here are the common violations that you can go ahead and proactively start to address before code compliance have to come out and issue either a warning notice or a citation. So that's been helping. We've been getting calls. Neighbors have been telling us we got those letters, and we see our neighbors cleaning up their property. So we'll make sure that we keep on doing some of those proactive things to get us.
And Commissioner Johnson, could you just highlight maybe some of the areas that District 4 has benefited from the work of code compliance?
So I know the sweeps are helping. I think one of the neighborhoods that recently got that letter is in District 4. I heard from a resident, so they're being proactive and getting ready to come, for you guys to come through. I'm really interested to hear that you have such high participation in the loitering, because that was just initiated, about a year or so, about less than, since you've been in office, right?
Yes, it was around October.
October.
And
So that's really
yeah,
quick.
and yes, so within I would say maybe a month and a half to 2 months, our business owners have been very responsive in signing on, and now we're getting calls saying, how can we sign on? So we are, going out taking the forms for them to complete the agreement, and then posting the no loitering signs in the windows. And even hearing from the residents, we've gotten great responses because they're saying that they're seeing
Yes.
crime rates going down in those at those locations, and also definitely they've been seeing a decrease in the loitering.
And that makes our residents just feel safer, especially when you're going into a gas station. As a single woman, we typically don't get gas at night, or we're really particular at what gas station we're stopping at. So these type of initiatives just can make everyone in the community feel much safer. So that one has definitely been a huge impact on District 4. But I think just in general, having their team be as accessible as they have been. They come to our community connections breakfast to give out information that we have quarterly. So they're always available to make sure the community is getting the information that they need, so that everyone is aware that what we really want is compliance. It's not so much about citations and fines, but we want compliance, so that everyone's living environment is better.
Absolutely. And it makes me appreciate what you all just talked about, the role your department director Clark plays in public safety, as well as, there's the aesthetics which are great, and that makes property value increase, which is, I appreciate as a homeowner in this area, but also the public safety element seems like it's huge here as well. So we appreciate your role in that. And I was just curious. So say somebody doesn't, they get the letter, they don't get to, or they ignore it, or they miss it, or they don't get to making the fixes that you suggest, or it's something that's not on that list. It's a little more obscure. Can you walk us through the process of what that looks like in terms of having them rectify that?
Once we receive the complaints, we will send an officer out to conduct the investigation. And so when we go out, the officer actually has to observe the violation. So we have to see, what's going on. So for example, if it's in someone's backyard, but it's not visible from the street, then we will try to contact the complainant to say, hey, is it okay if we come into your property, maybe stand on your deck or look out your back window so that we can observe the violation? Because if we can't observe the violation, then we can't take that case to court. And so we try to work with the complainants as much as we can so that we can observe the violation. Once we identify the violation, we can observe it, then we will issue a citation. Sometimes we issue a warning notice. The officer has discretion. And so what will happen is, either give them some time to come into compliance, or we will issue a citation. A lot of times these are repeat violations where we've gone out to these properties several times. And so you wouldn't get, the grace of a warning notice being issued in that case. We'll go straight to the citation. And then once we do that, we package the case up, document all the evidence, photographs, any notes in the system, package that case up and hand it off to the Office of the Solicitor General for adjudication. And they're our prosecutors. So then they will take the case to court. And at that point, once we hand off the case to the Office of the Solicitor General, we then will come in as the expert witness at court to basically testify that on the day of the violation, this is what we observed, and here were the actions that was taken.
No, it's helpful to understand the scope of that, and what people can expect if they find themselves on the wrong side of the code. Along those lines as well, I wanted to talk about that you were part of, or maybe just you created this vacant and foreclosure property registries when you were an administrator. What problems could you tell us a little bit about that, and what problems that was meant to solve, and how it's working so far?
Yes, so the vacant and foreclosure registry, the foreclosure registry was actually adopted in 2010 by the Board of Commissioners. And at the time I was working for the Board of Commissioners, Commissioner Connie Stokes, when that legislation was passed. And so I became the manager of the foreclosure registry. And then later we adopted the vacant property registry. But the issues that we were facing then, we were in a national housing crisis, and DeKalb County was actually at the forefront of adopting those ordinances to deal with the foreclosure crisis. And that way we were able to identify the property owner, because often when a property is in foreclosure, you don't know who the property owner is. And, months can go by, sometimes even a year or so can go by with never identifying who the foreclosing entity is. And so that registration enables the county to know who the property owner is. That is the responsibility of anyone who foreclosed on the property. You have to disclose who the property owner is. You have to identify a local agent that we can get in touch with, that we can hold responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the property. Along with that, there's a registration process that goes along with that, where you have to complete the registration and also pay a registration fee. That fee goes to the maintenance and the operation of the registries. And so, we have a responsibility across the board, everyone that owns property, and also as a government agency, we have a responsibility to make sure that those properties are upkept, because often when a property is vacant or foreclosed, they go neglected. And then you have the whole broken window theory, where one blighted property leads to other issues and becomes a public safety issue. And so if we can get ahead of it, it's a proactive way of, having that ownership and responsibility so that we can make sure that these properties are kept up.
And thank you for that. And Commissioner Johnson, do you hear about vacant and foreclosed properties from constituents?
We do. Probably not as bad as it was at the height, like she said, in about 2010, right after the recession and the housing bubble burst. But we definitely still do hear about vacant and blighted properties, especially with some of our increased unhoused situation, because now you can have squatters, you can have people camping out there, and it can just be a real nuisance to neighborhoods. But I know Director Clark and the Blight task force has been working really, really hard in addressing these properties. It's a long process. And I think that's one thing to touch on for people listening is I think one of the complaints that we kind of hear is, well, whether it's a vacant property or just a normal code compliance complaint, they make a complaint and then it may appear as if nothing's happening for a while because it's going through a legal process. And that doesn't just always happen overnight. So I think sometimes we get repeated phone calls like, hey, we've called and we've complained and y'all aren't doing anything. Well, we addressed it, we've gone out there, and now it's going through the process. And so for good reason, when you're dealing with someone's private property, there's rules and there's laws in place and processes in place to make sure that we're handling it all correctly and giving them time to try and come to compliance and meet their court dates and et cetera, et cetera. So I know it can be a little daunting for the neighbors who are living next to these nuisances, but I think I just want to make it clear that, it may look like we're ignoring it, but behind the scenes, there's still a lot of work happening.
Yeah, it's always important to keep in mind how many moving parts there are to these things. And Director Clark, I guess when a property gets a little further down the blight spectrum, you all at some point make the decision to do some demolition. So can you give us a sense of, when you decide to make that decision and when that rises, or which ones rise to the top of the list?
Yes. So usually properties that are unfit for human habitation, that are severely blighted, are the properties that we take through the In-Rem process. So the In-Rem process is a legal process in which, we do the same investigatory measures that we take with any other property, except instead of handing it off to the office of the Solicitor General, we hand it off to the law department. They then file a petition with the court to basically ask the court to allow DeKalb County to go onto that property and either demolish the property or secure the property. It could be cutting the grass, taking care of, overgrown vegetation or whatever it's going to take to bring that property into compliance. And so I'm excited because CEO Lorraine Cochran-Johnson basically has charged us with conducting a demolition a week because, we have a list of blighted properties that needs to come down, that needs to be secured and boarded, and the grass needs to be cut. And so she has basically enabled us to move forward in making sure that those properties move through the channels a whole lot quicker and get taken care of. Then, of course, the effects are, wide reaching in a community when you've had a blighted property impacting your quality of life, impacting property values. And so all of a sudden to get that removed, and then you have a nice clean vacant lot rather than a dilapidated or half-burned structure, it's really transformative for a neighborhood. And so how we determine which properties are addressed, we basically look at them in its entirety, the most severe ones. We try to get ahead of those and get those down. So some of these properties are, the burned structures. It might be crime involved, where people are currently going in and out the property, vagrants, setting fires to an already vacant and abandoned structure. And so we look at everything in totality. We also receive complaints from the neighbors, telling us, this is what's going on. We do an investigation. And if we see that, there's a property that the situation is escalating, now all of a sudden, we have people in there, abusing drugs, or there's been a fire, then that property naturally will get raised to the top. So we look at all the properties and we rank them, but depending on the situation, it might get escalated based on the activity surrounding that property.
We had we've had 2 blighted properties demolished in District 4 in the last month or so. 2 really close to me, which I was very excited about. One on Shepherd Road, which is it's like a half mile from my house. I drive by it every day coming home.
Yeah.
Happy to see that one come down. That one had a little less fanfare. And then the one on West Mountain Street is right off Memorial Drive. It has been a blighted property for a good 10 years. There's been crime. There was a fire, but the fire didn't destroy it enough. I believe there was even a murder there. There's been vagrants, you name it. We have had it on that property. And so when we had that one come down, we had the whole press conference. We made that one, a much bigger deal. And the amount of excitement we got from the community when we posted that property was coming down, I think that was one of our biggest engagements on social media from our posts. And just even the next weekend when I was out and about in my community, everyone was like, oh, thank you so much for bringing that property down, because it was just it was that big of a problem for the neighbors and the community. So people were really excited to see that the county listened. It took a while, but we've been listening and we were able to take action. And I think it's really important for the community to see that, yes, it may take a minute, but we're listening and we're working on it and we're taking action on it.
Yes.
You see, yeah, so that's all helpful to hear and hear how that process works. Can you give us a sense, Director Clark, of how long that list is so it can kind of help set people's expectations? Because I know you said you're doing one a week, correct?
Yes.
So how long is the list of?
So I don't have those exact numbers, with me to give you an exact amount, but I can tell you it's well over 75 currently. And of course, conditions change every day. We may get, calls of properties that we're not aware of, that's not on the list. And then when we go out, then we discover, yes, these conditions are, conducive to us taking this action, preemptive action to go. So we don't really get involved until that property owner becomes non-responsive, where we can't get in touch with the property owner, or the property owner simply is not willing or is not able to take care of the property. And so at that point is when we will step in for the sake of the community to go ahead and remediate the issue.
Gotcha. Yeah. So moving on now to kind of I'm sure it's one of the top hits in your department is the noise complaints / party house issue. And I saw in the news that you all had to get involved with a residential property being used for large events without that permit. What authority does code compliance have in those situations to bring the hammer down?
Yeah. So basically, whenever we have these party houses, there are several ordinances that are being violated. And let me say, we don't get a lot compared to our other violations. We don't get a lot of complaints. However, when we do get those complaints, usually it speaks volumes. It's the loudest cry, because you're having a disturbance that's really impacting people's quality of lives when you are working from home, or you might have a young baby that mom needs rest, and then you have a party house next door. That's very disruptive. And then it doesn't just involve one neighbor directly adjacent to the property. It might involve the entire community, because usually it impacts everyone, from the traffic, on the street where you can't get into your driveway, but it's the constant disturbance is what's alarming. And of course, with those types of violations, there is usually a zoning violation, because if you live in a single family residential property, it cannot be used as an event venue, which is what some of these properties inadvertently gets converted to illegally, is an event space. And so that's against the zoning regulations. Also, you cannot charge a fee to attend an event in a residential property. That's just not the setting for that type of activity. We have zoned areas for that, our commercially zoned areas where you can go and set up an event center, but a residential neighborhood is just not the place for that. And so, when we get those complaints, usually we look at, are there any property maintenance violations? And I can tell you what comes along with those It's an open storage of trash and debris, because when you
Mhm.
have those types of activities, then there's usually a lot of trash associated with it that may be left over the following day, whether it's beer cans or beer bottles or trash on the lawn, on the street. And so we have to address those issues. And then, most importantly, is the noise complaints that come along with it. So I'm glad that there's currently an amendment to the noise ordinance that will hopefully give us more teeth in our current ordinance to be able to enforce some of these issues. So I'm looking forward to, passage of that ordinance. That's going to just help us, um, finally be able to address these issues more effectively.
So, with the passage of that potential passage of the noise ordinance is something we've been debating on the BOC. One of the questions that has come up is a mechanism for the officers to actually measure the noise. So, how do you guys go about doing that? Is it just by ear? Do you have machines? Are there enough machines? How can we help support that part of it?
Yeah, so currently we do not have decibel meters. And so part of the reason why we don't have decibel meters, number one, they're expensive. A lot of the complaints that come in during the day, even with the current ordinance, they're not really a violation because you're allowed to have, certain noises before a certain time. It's after 11 p.m., when these noise complaints really gets cranking up, but we're not at work. The police department is at work, but they don't enforce zoning violations. So they can only look at, is the noise loud enough during that time? And if it is, then yes, they will issue a citation for that. Or the other issues with the parking along the street. You can park on most streets, but if you're parked on the wrong side of the street, if you're blocking a fire hydrant, so then usually parking violations becomes an issue.
Good to know. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Commissioner Johnson, do you have anything to add to that, like in terms of how that issue, has it affected District 4 or in what ways? And yeah, just thoughts on that.
Yeah, we had one property that Director Clark helped us on last year. It was not so much like that nighttime party house, but it was a residential, zone residential. They would have a food truck out there. They were advertising like day parties, and we were getting lots of emails from neighbors. And Director Clark sent her team out there and found a plethora of violations, got them into compliance. I've not received a complaint on that one in almost a year since since Director Clark's team took those actions. So it was very effective in making sure that you're zoned residential. You need to be residential. I mean, they were advertising as if they were a business, and it was a lot. It was a whole lot right there off of Rock Ridge Road. So we've definitely had those issues, and that's just one that comes to mind because it was it took a lot of work to get them into compliance, and we got a lot of complaints from one neighbor, but she was right to continue to email us and make sure we addressed it. So we appreciate it when we're hearing from our residents like that, because that really tells us, okay, this isn't just a one-off situation. It's really is a situation that we need to be paying a lot of attention to, because someone might have a graduation party that a neighbor complains about, but that might be a one-time thing. But when we're having consistent parties or planned events where where you need to pay to attend or pay to get the food from a food truck, and none of it's licensed, we got to take the action. So it was good to see that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure that that was a relief. Any time that gets dealt with, it's a relief for all the neighbors. So now we're coming to the section where I ask about final takeaways, and I think in this section I like to just encourage y'all to think about general listeners, residents, and what you would like them to take away related to this issue. So, Director Clark, do you want to start?
Yeah, so, as far as, takeaways, we are adopting a new strategy in code compliance so that we can go ahead and be as effective as possible. CEO Lorraine Cochran-Johnson, she has this theme where it's the DeKalb Reimagine. And so it's not just DeKalb Reimagine, but on the departmental level, we're reimagining how we do what we do to be more effective. And so we're taking a proactive block by block approach in how we address the issues across DeKalb County. So some of those things is expanded hours, like I mentioned before. We are now working longer days. We're working 6 days a week so that we can basically be able to address some of the issues that exist outside of normal operating hours. And, some of those issues might be the commercial vehicles, the parties, the major overhaul of vehicles, where all of a sudden on the weekends and the evenings, we turn the front yard or driveway into a mechanic shop, or even the kids after hours pull the basketball goal out into the cul-de-sac and we're impeding traffic. So those are some of the issues that we can address with those expanded operating hours. We've increased the number of citations that we're issuing, and we'll continue to do that to make sure that if you're violating the codes, then you're going to be held responsible. And public education, we are having a big push to make sure that we're not just enforcing, but we're making sure that all the residents understand the codes and understand what a violation is so that they can then begin to correct the behavior. The VSS ordinance, which is the video surveillance ordinance, we are continuing to see lots of success with that. We're going to continue to enforce that. We're in this maintenance phase of that, where just everyone who is supposed to be in compliance, they are in compliance. But we're making sure that those cameras are up and working so that if there's any illegal activities or any crimes committed, our police department has access to the footage they need to resolve those crimes in a timely manner. We're going to continue our commercial corridor sweeps, taking that block by block approach, not just for the commercial corridors, to make sure that they remain in compliance, make sure we address illegal signage and any blighting aspects on our corridors, but also our feeder neighborhoods, making sure that we strengthen those neighborhoods through enforcement and education. And I'm most excited about this blight tax that just went into effect. And basically, the blight tax is any property that is not in compliance with the code that meets the qualifications for the blight tax will be assessed a tax that is 10 times the regular tax rate until they bring that property into compliance. And of course, we're not in the business of overtaxing anyone, but again, as residents of DeKalb, we all share responsibility to make sure that we keep our properties up. And when we neglect to keep our properties up, then that's a shared responsibility, for all the taxpayers in the county, because it becomes an unfunded mandate. And so now we're holding those property owners responsible and accountable that if you're not maintaining your properties, then you're going to pay an increased tax rate so
Yeah.
that we can use the funds for community redevelopment purposes and making sure that we then work to bring the property into compliance. And then last but not least, the loitering initiative that, again, Madam CEO put in place, and that's working very well. We're going to expand that now to cover some of our other businesses like our liquor stores, some of the dollar stores that may also pose a threat for loitering. Try to get them on board so that our police department can enforce those loitering laws on private property.
Yeah, a lot happening. And 10 multiplying property tax by 10, I think will probably create some urgency. So that's, I understand the logic there. That's great. Commissioner Johnson, anything you want to share along these issues of compliance and enforcement for your district?
Yeah, and we hadn't touched on the blight tax too much in this conversation, but I'm excited about that one as well. I've seen when I was with City of Stone Mountain, a similar blight tax we implemented that, and there's one property that actually got hit with that blight tax, and they very quickly started bringing it up to code, and then they eventually have now sold the property And that's, that's what we want. We want property owners to be compliant. We want property owners to be good neighbors, whether that's residential or that's commercial. And if you're not, then you should be handling that burden, not just your neighbors. And so either bring it up to code or pass it on to someone who will be able to maintain it. That helps, all of us with our property values, with our aesthetics in our community. So I think it's exciting to see some of these actions that we're taking. I know it's my understanding, Director Clark, that I think before you came in office, we were doing about 60 code violations a month. I believe we've tripled that, if not quadrupled that. So your team is out there working. I think our residents should be able to really see that impact. And again, it's not about collecting the fees. It's about being compliant, being a good neighbor. But sometimes you do have to hit people in the pocketbook before they pay attention. So, we'll do what we need to do. Madam CEO has her Reimagine DeKalb. I have my engineering progress for DeKalb. So it all works together. I'm really excited for the way that Director Clark and the co-compliance team is integrating and working with the police department, working with our planning and zoning team. We have a new short-term rental agreement or ordinance coming on board soon that will help some of these party houses. So we have a lot of great things happening in DeKalb County, and just stay tuned. We're trying real hard to make progress work in DeKalb County.
Exciting times. Director Clark, for my last thing, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you? You mentioned coming into the office. Are there any other ways that you recommend people get in touch with your office?
So they can reach out to us via the web, DeKalbCountyGA.gov. If you click on departments, code compliance, you can issue a complaint on the web. We have a web submittal link there for you to file those complaints over the web. You can call Code Compliance at 404-687-3700. You can email us at codeenforce@DeKalbCountyGA.gov, or if it all fails, come into the office and file a complaint. So whichever mechanism that you would like, we have a mode for you to be able to file a complaint.
Great. Y'all are available. That's good to hear.
Yes.
And what about you, Commissioner Johnson? How would you like folks to get in touch with you?
Yes, if you guys ever need to get in touch with us, you have questions, if you all want to reach out to me with complaints, we get those quite a lot, and we pass those right along to Director Clark and her team. So you can email me at Chakira@DeKalbCountyGA.gov. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram under the handle @Commissioner Chakira-Johnson, or we are on Blue Sky or X as Commissioner CJJ. Please also consider subscribing to our YouTube channel right here. If you do find this podcast helpful and you want to know whenever a new podcast is released, just remember to hit the bell icon so you can receive the notifications in the future. And again, I just appreciate everyone tuning in, and we look forward to sharing more information with you in our next episode.
Absolutely. All right, Director Clark, one last thank you for joining us. And
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All your work. We appreciate all your work, keeping our county looking nice and keeping it safe. So we appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. And Commissioner Johnson, I'll see you next time.
See you next time, Matt.